guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about Star Trek Picard Episode 6, The Impossible Box. We're going to take a look at the trailer for the episode, we're going to take a look at a sneak peek scene. So let's take a look and see what we can learn about this week's coming episode.
In a few hours, we'll be on a Borg cube without authorization.
This cube is under Romulan control.
I believe she's close to discovering who she really is. We have to get there as quickly as possible.
The journey always begins with the closing of the eyes.
What's happening to me?
You must take me to her now.
They are in some serious trouble.
Let go! Let go of me!
They are not responding.
Well, for starters, I must say it's great that our finally A story and B story from this show are finally going to intersect. We've had Picard doing his thing for quite some time on his ship. We've had the stuff going on with Soji on the Borg cube, which has kind of been a bit stalled the last few weeks. That story hasn't really been progressing a huge amount. So it's good that we can now catch up to what's going on and finally get these two worlds colliding. That's definitely going to add a new dynamic to the show, which I'm really keen to see how it plays out. And it seems like our crew are going to be up for a hard task. We've got to have the guys from the last Serena infiltrate this Romulan-controlled Borg cube, which surely isn't going to be an easy task. This is up there with a level of difficulty for missions here, I would imagine. It would appear that Soji is finally cottoning on to what is going on with her and her background. You can see her rummaging through old photos. It kind of seemed a little bit retro, perhaps, to have a whole lot of printed out photographs on her desk in her room or whatever. People don't really print out photos anymore to any great extent. It's all, photos on your iPad, photos on your phone. Printed out photos are kind of, even by today's standards, a bit of a thing of the past. It sort of seems a little bit retro to go back to her rummaging through old printed out photographs of her and her sister. But obviously it's a storytelling device there where we get her kind of analysing her history and her background, because technically speaking, she's probably got 20-something years of memories in her head which are all fake. And she's probably starting to realise that she is only, in fact, a few years old, and she has a lifetime of memory implants. She's kind of waking up to their maybe not being quite as legitimate as she thought they were. We've got some shots of somebody doing this kind of Romulan Rubik's Cube kind of thing. And then we've got shots of Soji in this sort of strange room with a timber floor and all like lamps all over the floor, which I'm guessing is kind of like an analogy or is mirroring this Rubik's Cube thing, because there's sort of panels on the floor which kind of vaguely resemble the Rubik's Cube. So what's going on here certainly seems a little bit cryptic or a little bit existential, perhaps, with the analogy between the Rubik's Cube box and the actual kind of room that she's in with the lamps and the smashing at the floor. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what finally activates Soji, because it does very much appear that she activates in this episode. We've got a shot of a little, what appears like a little sort of jade figurine of some kind coming out of the box. And obviously the box, or the Rubik's Cube, is meant to mirror the Borg cube. We've got the cube that they're in, we've got the little puzzle cube. It's all these little analogies, and perhaps the figurine rising out of the Rubik's Cube is kind of, meant to symbolise Soji awakening from inside the Borg cube. You've got the big cube that Soji's in and she's kind of awakening. You've got the Rubik's Cube opening up with the little figurine popping up. There's obviously a nice little symmetry there. And at the end of the trailer, we get a look at this Borg, which kind of looks a bit like Picard in sort of Locutus mode. Obviously, we've seen him before in a couple of past trailers. People were saying it's Locutus. Obviously, it's not Picard. But there seems to be some kind of analogy there between the bald, sort of Locutus-esque Borg and maybe Picard. So maybe this is kind of like an awakening of Soji. She's kind of seeing this Borg, which kind of looks a little bit like Picard when he was Locutus, and maybe that will kind of trigger something in her, much like it did with Daj when she sort of saw Picard's face and she was sort of drawn to go and find him, perhaps. Another thing I'm looking forward to in this episode is I'm hoping or assuming that Picard gets to reunite with his old buddy Hugh Borg. It's obviously been a while since they've seen each other, and it will be interesting to see the interaction there. That's something I think everybody's looking forward to, seeing how these guys are going to reunite. Next, we've got a little bit of a sneak peek at a scene from the upcoming episode, which is a dream sequence from Soji. It shows her as a young girl. She's obviously woken up from her bed. It's a sort of a rainy night. There's like thunder and lightning going on, and she's walking down the hallway of a house. And in this scene, I noticed she's carrying the same stuffed toy that she has on her bed in her quarters on the Borg cube, to perhaps go and see what her father is up to. He appears to be working in some kind of arboretum. There's sort of a lot of plants there on shelves and on benches, so maybe he's some sort of arborist. And she's sort of sneaking around. She's meant to be in bed. He's doing some work. If we have a look at his face in this scene, I don't recognize the character here. I was thinking maybe this was meant to be Maddox. He sort of vaguely sort of resembles Maddox, but I don't think it's Maddox. And obviously Soji is poking about. She's meant to be in bed, and at the last minute she gets sprung, and her sort of father figure calls out, "Soji!" You know, like she's meant to be in bed. At the end of this scene, Soji wakes up in her bed on board the Borg cube. So obviously this is one of these little dream sequences that's sort of meant to give a little bit of insight as to these memory implants that she's been given, to kind of concoct a false backstory for her to kind of believe who she is, which is all probably going to start to unravel in this episode. So it'll be interesting to see what our crew gets up to in this episode. It will be very interesting to see what the aftermath of the death of Bruce Maddox is, whether Jurati is going to get sprung for unplugging his life support, so to speak, and whether the EMH dobs her in. Can't wait to see this episode. Looks like it's going to be an interesting one. Thanks guys for watching. Please subscribe, like, share, all that sort of stuff. So I will see you at the end of the week for my review of episode 6 after it's aired. And I'll see you then.